This is Inspirational Women, a weekly series shining the spotlight on female trailblazers making a true difference in our community. Once again, here is Kate Daniels.
Chelsea Ann is an integrative medicine and women's health practitioner who has had her own journey of self-discovery about her feminine nature and brings to us her new book, The Feminine Frequency, a guide for women to tune into their nature and awaken humanity. A book that is truly a guide for our own personal discovery and living our best life. Chelsea Ann, good morning. It's so wonderful to have you join us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Here we are on this segment called Inspirational Women, and I feel that you have been inspired and are inspiring us in terms of our feminine nature, womanhood, as you said, motherhood, and how all of this has been playing and needs to play in our lives to live a life that feels balanced, where we feel that we're not in competitive mode, that we're building not just a good life for ourselves, but importantly for our children too.
Yeah, so, it's really one of the most important subjects I think that people can talk about, but it's very controversial because it really challenges society and what we've been taught to be right and the way we've been programmed to really become like men. And to bring up a good example, I was sitting in a room. I studied with many teachers in my life, and my background is in reproductive medicine, and I studied midwifery, family practice. I work with menopause patients now, women's health. I have worked with women my entire life, and I've really focused on motherhood and how do you bring conscious children into the world, writing books on epigenetics during pregnancy, conscious conception. And there was a teacher that said, if the frequency of women changes, so will the entire human race, because they birth the children into this world. And I don't think anyone in that room really heard that sentence the way I heard it. And it's almost like my destiny sort of dropped into me. And I remembered that I was here on a mission to really understand what that meant. Later in my life, in the most recent book I wrote called The Feminine Effect, Discovering Your True Nature, and then the follow-up book of that is The Feminine Frequency, which we can speak about both today. The Feminine Effect is really my personal story. It's almost like a movie where I take women through the process that I had to go through to return to my nature as a woman and to really understand like all the identities and the pressure that society puts on us to become something that we're not, and to make power and success based on a man's world more powerful than what a woman's true power is. And so discovering that was quite a journey.
And really, in terms of length of time, you've packed a lot of awareness and growth into a relatively short period of time.
I have. I mean, I'm the author of 5 books, and I'm also a mother. So the most important role I have is I'm a mother. And I think that being a mother is the most important role. And I think it's what, for women that choose to be a mother, and I think it's what society really hasn't honored. And so the things I talk about in my book is, where did we go off? What is femininity? We don't even know what it is anymore, because when feminism was created, I'm going kind of in my next book, The Feminine Frequency, not just my personal story, but we're not in our nature of, what it means to be a woman and what is a woman's nature. Like, no one would understand what that question is. And I didn't either until I had to go through a transformational spiritual process to change. And what I realized through my own personal process is I had taken on all of society's definition of what success is. And when feminism was created, used to be a very active feminist. I'm highly educated. I've traveled the world. I have bank accounts, homes, all those different things. And I vote, and I think all those things are wonderful. But I do know that, in order for women to become independent, we had to become financially independent. And so from that definition of what success is, we defined our success based on a man's definition of it. And we've really lost the intuition, the sense of community, the sense of motherhood, the sense of belonging, the sense that, all of our intuitive healing gifts, the deep connection we have to spirit and knowing and dreams. And I don't mean this on a woo-woo level. I just mean that that's what our gifts are. And for whatever reason, power is defined by what males have defined it as. And I'm questioning that in a lot of my books.
When you talk about our intuition, which I didn't even think about in my younger years. And I think
Yeah.
I was about 30 when I became aware of intuition. And I thought, oh, this is an incredible gift. I want this. And it's taken time to nurture that. Do I think, to your point of how that's been shoved aside and we need to embrace it, I think that's very key. Along with motherhood, I am not a mother in the actual sense. I'm a stepmom, I'm an aunt,
Hmm.
those sorts of things. But I appreciate how you talk about motherhood as being even broader than necessarily just birthing a child.
Motherhood is your heart. And I think not I think, what has happened on this planet is because men and women's hearts are all closed, and I mean deeply closed, we wouldn't be in the level of wars and of greed and of, power structures and all of these things that are happening. I mean, we would talk about the Epstein files, these controversial things that I don't believe we would be there if females were really in their heart. And I mean, by being in their heart it's a very different frequency, a very different vibration than being in the logical mind. And so every generation, we're teaching children that activities and doing and money and schooling. And I mean, I'm not to say that these things are negative, not to say that, this drive isn't important, right? That's what we're trained it is. But there is all these other things that why in our Western society is it not successful to become a mother? Like I'm questioning those things. Why do we not value our intuition as women? Why do we put that to the side and value these other skills more? What makes them more powerful? It's just our programming. And, in the second book, this is now a really controversial subject. I questioned this concept of narcissism because I didn't know what it was and I had to look it up. I'm like, it's all over. It's on social media, it's on YouTube. I can't open my phone without somebody talking about it, right? I had encountered that kind of a personality with a male before, but I encountered it with a woman, and it was a mother figure. And I couldn't stop figuring out why have women taken on so many roles of manipulation, control, envy, all of, really biblical things, these negative biblical kind of personality traits. Why have women taken that on? And it seems like they're getting passed on through every generation. Now, I'm not saying that men don't carry these characteristics of entitlement and jealousy and competition and manipulation, but why have women gone so outside of their heart that we now have that and we're passing that on to our children? And so, what this book really shows, the feminine frequency, is what a woman is not, and what the path of like letting those personality traits go, which I argue are survival traits that we've taken on as we've had to fight to be into a man's world and gone so far out of our nature. And we don't even know we're doing it. We're lying to ourselves. And I describe these different characteristics like what is manipulation? What is control? How does it take us away from our intuition? And how do you gain these powers back that have been lost by taking on these personality traits?
And as you said, you have studied with a lot of teachers, and you're bringing a lot of that awareness and that kind of consciousness to your books, currently The Feminine Frequency. So we can, without having to seek a lot of outside trainings that we may not be able to fit into our lives, I think with the book, you're able to guide us through stories, through the research you've done, touching on your own personal story too, of course, for what we can do.
Yeah. Exactly, exactly. So it's really two books. One is a heart-based book that I'm actually talking to a movie director today. I have for my third a movie director that's interested. To be truthful, it's a very good book. It plays out like a movie. It has music to the soundtrack, and it's an unbelievable story. It truly is. And it's like, how can a woman, and that story is, the woman has everything in the entire world, all the money you could ever imagine, the top 1%, and she leaves it to figure out what her nature is as a woman. And she really goes up against the patriarchy, but the patriarchy within herself, and takes away all these outside identities that if we're always looking for something else to make us happy, this dangling carrot, we're really not in our nature as a man or as a woman. Because if we were, and most people are listening, like, what is she talking about? What is their nature? And I didn't know either. And it's really just simplifying and redefining what success is for you based off of your own definition and authenticity, not based off of what society deems to be guiding you. And then in that book, in both of these books, I'm really taught by this man named Abdi Electricite, the best teacher I have ever met. He wouldn't need his name to be ever known. He would be hiding in the Costa Rican jungle, but he's the male guide in these books, and his knowledge is so powerful. So he's this logical male guide that takes the feminine through this as she's understanding herself and her own powers. He's reminding women, you've forgotten how powerful you are. Let me remind you. And both books are two different ways of looking at it for the different kind of reader. Someone in their heart who's, going through the heart opening process and all the pain that may be caused by that, and someone in their mind that needs to logically be taught step by step, how do you go through this process of reconnecting to your femininity.
So I see this as two things going on. It's so important for us as women to discover this and to begin to live it and be able to then pass this on to our children so that it becomes just natural rather than them having to overcome so much and have all these challenges. I'm thinking of the addictions and such that go on.
Exactly. So let's take it back. So this is kind of talking on a spiritual and more esoteric level, but let's take it to practical life. So I'm a practitioner, and that's why I can make this knowledge very practical. And in the feminine frequency, I interviewed women from all over the world, and I used actual clinical examples of people in Manhattan, women I would see all day long. It's all I've done for 15 years is work with women. And I have seen them mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually sick. And I'm questioning in this feminine frequency, why are they sick? What's making them sick? And what I'm arguing is it all comes down to they're not in their nature as a woman. So perhaps they're working 70-hour weeks. Perhaps they're leaving their children at home and then they're feeling a contrast. Most of the time, they're dealing with their trauma from their childhood. And in the book, in my books in general, I talk about nature of a woman. So even in my book, Fertile, I take women through how do you create this conscious child? How do you create a conscious family? And I always use the elements. And I didn't realize later that, when a woman's out of balance, all of nature's out of balance. Let me give you an example. So if you're looking at an apple orchard, and there's a tree in the apple orchard, and I'm the owner of that apple orchard, and that tree's sick and it's producing bad fruit. Let's pretend that tree's a woman and her hair's falling out and her life's falling apart. She's gotten into divorce. She's drinking alcohol. She's manipulating those around her. She's being competitive at work. She's getting ill. So let's say this is an apple orchard and this is a sick tree. If I was the owner of the apple orchard, I'd cut that apple tree down in order for all the other trees to survive, right? That's
Mhm.
what you would do so that it didn't spread sickness. But right now, what we're seeing with women is there is a lot of trauma. There is a lot of upheaval. There is a lot of chaos in a lot of women's lives. And I've been through it. So I can speak from a place of I went through it and I realized I was out of my nature when all of this kind of chaos was occurring. And I take women step by step through my own process, but also clinically of what I see and the very simple steps of like, well, maybe space needs to be created in your life. Let's start with the simple steps of how do you heal and how do you return to your nature because it really is nature out of balance.
So this is the thing. You have gone through the experience. We can learn from your story, not have to go start researching on our own, but be given that insight and apply it into our own lives.
Yes, very much so. And I find with the feminine effect, my personal story, that everyone who reads it is actually really triggered, not just triggered. And I said in the beginning, I said, the story, the woman is unnamed in the story, really. And I said, I represent all of you. I represent your mother. I represent your sister. I said, I represent the parts of you you hate. I said, you're going to become jealous. You're going to feel entitlement. You're going to feel that you're not chosen. You're going to love me. And then you're going to hate me. I guarantee it by the end of this book. And everybody read that sentence who's read it has said, I didn't believe you'd be able to take me there. And they said by the end of the book, I felt all of those emotions because they were in me. And everyone found a part of themselves in the story because we've all gone through loss. I mean, this story is about a woman who had the entire world at her fingertips, being in the top 1%, and gave it all up to find God truly. And to, either it was a moment of sabotage or it was a moment of the greatest glory ever of finding herself, right? And that may be a simple story that, oh, I've gone through a divorce. And that's why it's relatable. And so when you come back from that and you see all the ways that one is out of your nature, which can be what we're talking about is these emotional aspects of the personality, like being manipulative, lying, having chaos in relationships. There's so many ways that women have that dysfunction. It's really in their family line. And then they keep passing it along to their family line. And it has to be that, one tree comes along, cuts it down, or one owner, like going back into the orchard and just cutting that tree down and saying, this family's going to heal now. And that's what this work's all about.
And so you've, of course, found this and you're writing about it in your own life. What is your experience in women finding this for themselves and then really being able to find their own true nature and finding it that they're passing it on to their children?
Yeah. So how are they healing? So I think I take women through this process in 27 chapters, basically, that are very easy to read. So in the second book, The Feminine Frequency, it is a really easy, logical, step-by-step process. So the beginning of the book is I help identify what would take you out of your nature. And I give actual stories of women, that maybe are mentally, emotionally, and physically sick that I've seen in the clinic or that I've interviewed around the world, looking at, how feminism or how the act of becoming a man or acting as a man or taking on all these societal identities. And I don't mean that I work too. So I work and I own homes and I'm all these things, but how do I touch back into that femininity? There's not a good example of it on earth. There really isn't a woman that's teaching us how to reconnect all the time to spirit. How do we stay connected to our intuition? What is it? And so what has happened over time is we've forgotten, and that disconnection from the spiritual aspects or from just that deep knowing is making the women a lot very sick, right? We're going at a pace that we really can't handle. And then I think with AI, it's just going to get more
Mm.
intense and more intense and more intense, and people are going a bit crazy. And so in this book, I show how relationships can be a mirror to yourself. It's one of the greatest things in both books. I show that everything is a projection and the world is a mirror of your internal world. To me, it's ABCs, but to some people, they don't understand that, so how you use your own relationships in your life to see that. And then I also teach, in order to know that you live on an island, which all of us are living in a reality within our own island, we have to leave that island sometimes and separate from it to know that there's another way of living, you know? Other ways I give examples is, if you look at, I guess, something called our ego, I don't know if that's a concept your audience understands, but like this, we could call it like a personality we all hold, and it's many layers like an onion. And it's sort of like wearing red glasses. So in the book, I teach women, like, you've been wearing red glasses your whole life. You have been programmed that this is the way of living. And if I took off your red glasses and have you put blue glasses on for a little while, I will show you a world that's very different. And you will see you're in a wheelchair. And when you know you're in a wheelchair, you can then admit, I'm in a wheelchair. I don't know everything. There's more I can learn. There's more ways that I can touch into this deeper connection that all women have had. Basically, we all deeply knew forever, all throughout time. I believe it's probably a gene that either turns on or doesn't turn on for certain women. But now, because we had it in our systems of knowing, every woman thinks they know, but some are connected and some are not. And so now the knowing is turned into a sense of control of environment. So we flipped it upon ourselves to use control if we're not connected to our intuition, if that makes sense. So it's in all of these gifts, which are not turned on in women, have become inverted to make us sick. So we use concepts like control, power, manipulating to get our way, lying to ourselves and other people. It turns upon us and makes us sicker.
Yes, I get that. Wow. What an awakening. To,
Yeah, it really is
right?
when you put on new glasses. Yes.
Yes. And I love that you use these kinds of metaphors to really get a clearer understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, and in the books, there's the voice of the male, which is this very logical voice, which is Abdi teaching, and then there's this feminine voice that's going through it. And then there's these women that, so I give exact examples of from everything from hair loss to hormones to losing a job, losing a family, death, divorce, all of these common things that we go through. And I connect it back into, like, how can you take these moments of breakdown, like losing a job or having your house burned down or whatever it is? How can you take those moments of destruction and rock bottom and turn it into, I got to return to my nature as a woman? And when I reconnect to what that means, and most people are like, what are you talking about? And most of the time, it does take a moment of rock bottom to want to understand, why is things falling apart for me? And I do think it will be maybe job loss for people, that women, because I think career has taken on such a role for women that if you don't have that, then who are you? And so what these books teach is like the who you are. This is your ultimate power. Let me give it back to you. Let me show you how to tap into that. And let me show you that that kind of power is way more powerful than what you've been taught is true power on this planet.
And it becomes the turning point to living a healthier, physically
healthier life.
life.
Yeah. And it harmony, really, it becomes the turning point of like what is when women are living, and I don't mean just women, families. When family dynamics or dysfunctional families are living in such chaos for so many years, no one knows because they're on this island that it's not healthy. There'll be a few people that maybe leave their island, start traveling or see different things and say, oh, there's different ways of doing this. Maybe we could bring these healing techniques into the new generation. And so this book really speaks to those people that want to make those positive changes to create more harmony. So you can't know what is harmonious until you know what is not harmonious. You have to have the contrast. You have to have these moments of deep dive and failure to know how great it can be and how deeply in harmony you can be in your mind, body, and spirit.
And you were discovering this too in your research, right, Chelsea? That women in other cultures were experiencing this because they were not putting as a peak of achievement while we were talking about work, career, that this was not the be all end all.
Well, yeah. So in my second book, The Feminine Frequency, I interviewed different women all over the world as the beginning of the book, very simply. And I found a woman in Morocco that lived in this little tiny village. And in these tiny villages all over the world, feminism is building. So women, they don't want to have families anymore. They don't want to get married and they want to go work and they are like not partnering. That's happening. So in America, that has been happening for many generations. So we have no one else to compare it to. Everyone is not partnering. Families are not as, I'm not saying they're not as important, but career is the most important thing for a woman. It really is. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm the same way. I was the same way. But then there's other values. What are we missing on? How is this going to affect the future generations, right? So I wanted to find out in cultures that it's just happening, this movement is just happening. What are they seeing on the ground? And I found it. So I interviewed a few women, and one was from Morocco. And I said, what's happening in your culture? She said, well, I'm really struggling having female friendships right now. And she goes, my mother, would be known as a saint. She truly doesn't fight with anybody. She doesn't fight with my father. She takes care of her family. She's like an angel, like describing her mother. And she goes, she doesn't feel like she was held back. She got to have her children and she cooks. She takes care of the whole community. This is her role. And she goes, but I'm a banker. And I'm not having children. Most of the women I know don't want to have children. She goes, there's 7 divorces in my town a month or a week. She goes, that's how, she goes, we live in Morocco and this is a Muslim country and women are so families are becoming destroyed. And I'm not saying that feminism isn't good, but I'm saying, what is it doing to the family system? What is it doing to motherhood? And I'm questioning certain things of like, can we restructure it where values change and we look at it differently? I don't have answers.
Mhm.
I'm just pointing out that there's a problem. And I'm showing that returning to our feminine nature may be the answer to a lot more problems on this planet than we realize because we're going to return to our heart. So what's happening is there's just a lot of division occurring when a man and a woman are not really in their nature as what it's meant to be, a man and a woman.
It really comes down to feeling so simple. I know it can be complicated, but
Mhm.
really at the root of it, it is simple. It may take time or it doesn't have to take a lot of time to, I think, make that shift. And I think that you're helping us to gain that important awareness through your writing, through all of these books.
Yeah. And even if it's just like, let's say whoever's listening is a working woman and she's got her kids at home, but she's working 50 hours a week, right? Where does she begin? Like, I remember when I was writing this book, my sister started screaming at me and she's like, you want me to stop working so I can heal? Like, she was screaming and I didn't have the answer to it. I said, how am I going to talk to people that you're in it? You can't not work. You need 2 incomes. How do you create that kind of space to heal? I mean, and these are women that are battling alcoholism, that are battling themselves, battling weight, battling self-love, battling worth, battling their partner in battle with life because they feel like they're in survival. Where do you begin? Well, you have to begin to take space in every single moment of your life. Maybe it's day by day, like you begin to create a little bit of space. You begin to create a space in the week, space in the month, space in the year. And then, you slow down the things, the activities. And it sounds, well, that's so simple, but it's critical because women are headed towards I see autoimmune issues happening. I see thyroid, adrenals crashing out. So I had an example in the book of one patient who came to me because she wanted to become a mother and she ended up not becoming a mother. And the book is about how motherhood is not just having children, it's this love. And I worked with her, and she was trying to find her femininity, and she thought it was her job that was creating the lack of femininity. So she quit that job and found a different job, thinking it was that. And she said it wasn't that. It was this drive and not having space in her life. So all of this is just reconnecting back to yourself and not to the identities in the world. When she reconnects back to herself, she realized she didn't want children. She had to reconnect to her femininity through these other paths of intuition, of healing, of energy work, of different things. And it was all a journey back to yourself.
And I think succinctly that is it, a journey back to ourselves and finding the beauty that's there, I think some of it is that it is simple. Sometimes we want to just really put in too much stuff, be too many things, find the simplicity in our lives.
Yeah, if you have 7, I mean, I was a great example. I had all the money in the whole world. I mean, really, I did. But never enough. Like, I had to become highly educated. I had to keep on taking more classes. I became a yogi. I had to travel the world. Like, I had a dangling carrot in front of me, and it was never enough. Like, I couldn't reach the peak that I was looking for, that was created by myself and my own egoic nature, that was really very masculine. Because that need to always do and do more, it can destroy a family. Everyone's selfish. You have to see, are these things really that vital in my life to keep holding this identity of who I think I am? Maybe you have to lose your career to see it's not that important. Maybe you have to lose the relationship to see if you can live without it. And it really comes down to Buddhism. It's like, it's all just attachments to things that are so silly once you let them go.
Well, I think the feminine frequency, along with your other books, really is an important way for us to be able to have so many experiences without having to go through all of them. I think we learn a lot from stories from each other's experiences, and your honestly sharing your experiences, I think, is just such a gift and is invaluable to us.
Yeah, and I think that vulnerability and opening your heart and just being truthful it's these little moments of like, don't lie to anybody, don't lie to yourself, don't lie about who you are. And then when you reconnect your authenticity, you find that it really comes down to values. What are your values? And then when you find that, you can find what your worth is, because you create healthy boundaries of those who can be with those values and those who can't.
Well, I, for one, and I trust everyone listening, women and men too, because it affects the relational dynamics, will appreciate the growth and the awareness that comes from these books. To find out more, we should mention your website.
Yes, it's Chelsea Ann Effect.
And you're on all the other socials too.
Yes.
So Chelsea Ann, and we've been talking about the feminine frequency, which is such great awareness, such an opening into great realization for our lives. I do appreciate you and the time you've taken with us this morning, Chelsea Ann.
Thank you so much. It was so great to be here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for being here this morning to meet these special guests, providing us information and insights to create a better self, a better world for all. Please check this station's website for the podcasts for more information about these guests, and please share the stories with your family and friends. I'm Kate Daniels. If you'd like to connect with me, simply send me an email, katedaniels@hubbardradio.com. March is Women's History Month. Honor the women in your life.
Thank you for listening to Inspirational Women. Tune in every Sunday morning at this time to hear about those truly empowering the Northwest community, all for the greater good. Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women are a public service of Hubbard Radio Seattle.